What is the meaning of life? Why are we here? Why do we keep going, waking, eating, loving, working, and then dying in a world where meaning often feels absent? These aren't just morbid questions. They are the foundation of existentialism and what it means to be human. Existentialism is a philosophical and cultural movement that arose in response to one of the most turbulent periods in human history. Today we'll explore how two works of imaginative literature, Albert Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus and T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, help us grasp the complexity of existentialism, not just intellectually, but on a human level, emotionally, spiritually, and personally, differing from person to person in their interpretation, just what it means to be human and alive. Existentialism is a 20th century philosophical movement that explores the individual's search for meaning in an indifferent, often chaotic universe. It emerged as a response to the devastation of World War I and II, when millions were killed, societies collapsed, and people lost faith in systems that once gave life direction: religion, government, and tradition. During and after World War I, the world witnessed atrocities on a scale never before seen, from the Holocaust to Hiroshima. Existentialists such as Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus observed that in the face of such horror, life could no longer be assumed to have meaning. Instead, meaning had to be constructed by the individual through action, freedom, responsibility, and in Camus' case, acts of revolt against the indifference of the universe. What makes existentialism unique, though, is that it isn't just a philosophy. It's a way of life, an emotional and psychological state, a response to a real human experience. And this is where imaginative literature truly shines and plays a critical role in understanding existentialism. Unlike purely theoretical texts, literature captures how it feels to live without answers. Through metaphor, symbol, and structure, literature transforms philosophy from endless words and often boring drivel into something tangible and human. This shows us that literature doesn't just reflect existentialism, it brings it to life, making it personal and accessible for a broader audience and the everyday reader, so that they may truly understand what it means to exist. Albert Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus begins not with a theory, but with a bold claim. There is but one truly serious philosophical question, and that is suicide. On this morbid note, Camus retells the Greek myth of Sisyphus, a man condemned to roll a boulder up a hill for all of eternity, only for it to fall back down each time just as he reaches the top. Camus expertly uses this image as a metaphor for the human condition, repetitive and seemingly without meaning, at times. But rather than despairing, Camus makes a provocative argument. He says, the struggle itself is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Here, Camus introduces a key existential concept: revolt against the universe. Sisyphus may be trapped in a meaningless cycle, but in choosing to continue, he asserts his freedom and his act of revolt. This decision to live in spite of absurdity is at the heart of existential defiance. Stylistically, Camus writes with clarity and simplicity, using myth not only to appeal to the reader emotionally, but to bypass jargon often used by philosophers. By selecting a well-known story, such as the myth of Sisyphus, he allows readers to immediately recognize the stakes and apply it to their own life through their own existential lens. As philosopher Roy Lotz describes, the myth of Sisyphus, blending storytelling with moral reflection, doesn't tell us what to think, but how to approach our existence, as a form of wisdom literature. This blend of narrative and philosophy allows us to explore existentialism by our own basis, helping us not only understand it intellectually, but internalize it. Literature like this shows that we are not alone in our questions, and that the act of questioning is, in itself, meaningful and what it means to be existential. While Camus offers clarity through myth, Eliot provides the opposite: confusion through fragmentation. T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, published in 1922, was written in the shadow of World War I. Eliot had witnessed a continent torn apart by violence and war, with the result being a poem that reflected spiritual decay and cultural collapse. The poem begins with the ironic and iconic "April is the cruelest month," subverting the idea of springtime as a time of hope. From there, it jumps between speakers, languages, and references, anything from Shakespeare to Eastern philosophy. This fragmented form mirrors the philosophical and cultural fragmentation of the post-war world. In one moment we hear, "I will show you fear in a handful of dust," a powerful image of decay and disillusionment with the current state of Europe and the destruction wrought by the war. This poem's lack of narrative coherence reflects a world that no longer makes sense. This is deliberate. Stanzas jump around, changing from topic to topic. There are entirely new stories in each section of the poem. In this, Eliot crafts a literary experience that forces the reader to feel lost, disoriented, and uncertain, just like the modern individual in the spiritually barren landscape of post-war London. However, despite its complexity, the poem's structure, tone, and imagery all reflect key existentialist themes: isolation, alienation, and the absence of clear meaning. The speaker's journey through the wasteland becomes a metaphor for the existential condition, a world where systems have failed, and the individual must search for fragments of meaning in the ruins. By embodying these feelings in form and language, Eliot's poem helps readers not just understand existentialism, but feel it, making it one of the most powerful examples of literature as a philosophical tool. Camus and Eliot offer contrasting responses to the same problem. Camus embraces clarity and directness. Through myth, he shows that even in the face of absurdity, individuals can create meaning by choosing to persist. His tone is defiant, almost hopeful, suggesting that the act of living, even in full knowledge of its futility, is still valuable. Eliot, by contrast, presents a world already spiritually dead. His work reflects the consequences of not finding meaning, the disorientation, disconnection, and dread that results from a loss of collective purpose. And yet, both texts are deeply existential. Camus shows how to respond to meaninglessness with action. Eliot shows what happens when that action is absent, when individuals are paralysed by this disillusionment and fragmentation showcased in the poem. These texts deepen our understanding of existentialism by showing that it's not a single idea, but a range of emotion and intellectual responses to a world without inherent meaning. Through myth, metaphor, fragmentation, and form, they illustrate that existentialism is not only something we can think about, it's something that we can feel and live, experiencing through literature and our normal lives. Philosophy asks, what is the meaning of life? Literature asks, more importantly, what does it feel like to live without one? There can be no existentialism without accounting for the feelings of an everyday human being. This is the power of imaginative literature. It transforms abstract ideas into lived experiences. It defines existentialism. Camus helps us understand that meaning is something we must build ourselves. Eliot shows us what it looks like when that fails. Together, they reveal just how the emotional and spiritual dimensions of existential thought truly connect. For a young audience, especially students like us, these works also provide an academic insight. But they do more than that. They reflect the questions we ask ourselves every day, doing homework or staying up late at night for a task. What's the point? Why keep going? And who am I without someone else defining me? In helping us wrestle with those questions, through metaphor, structure, and narrative, literature proves itself to be one of the most powerful tools for understanding not just a cultural movement, but the human condition itself. Existentialism is built on who we are and what we do in our day-to-day life. This being covered in simply purely philosophical and theoretical text is insufficient. Imaginative literature is not only essential, it is what makes up existentialism. The building blocks of existentialism are the likes of Camus, Eliot, and countless others who have put forth these imaginative pieces and helps humanity as it is today truly understand what it means to exist. Existentialism may begin with despair, but through literature, we learn how to face that despair with courage, clarity, and imagination.